Hey, it's Sam, and as you can see behind me, I have a wheel. It's a actual zodiac wheel, and I'm going to be making this video describing the power of the Sidereal Zodiac in India. Now, this is a zodiacal structure and a zodiac system, the astrology of India, that is remarkable and came straight from the rashis, straight from the divine ancestors. And you want to understand that the Sidereal Zodiac itself is really sort of the axis around which all of the Vedic wisdom revolves, and in particular around which this stable and incredibly scientific zodiac has been able to flourish for thousands of years. It's not some kind of bolted on part. Well, there's Vedic astrology and sidereal or tropical zodiac, who knows which one? Actually, we do know which one. We look in the astrology text to see which one. And the Indians clearly practiced astrology using sidereal zodiac. There is no debate among anyone who's looked in the astrology text, even those who use another zodiac, understand that the Indian system was developed using sidereal zodiac. Now, some think they made a mistake, that they should have used tropical zodiac because they think tropical zodiac was the better zodiac. This is up to them, and it's up to you. And if you use tropical zodiac and you don't use the sidereal, the integrated sidereal zodiac with the 12-degree sidereal portions aligned with the 27-degree sidereal nakshatras, the solar portions in 12 degrees, 30-degree portions of the solar zodiac and 27 portions of the lunar zodiac integrated like it is in the Vedic astrology system, then that's fine. I'm your champion. You can certainly use tropical rashis and sidereal nakshatras if that's something that works better for you. But what's not okay is to act as though there was a mistake made, or to then sort of imply there was a mistake, but then say, well, it wasn't really a mistake, it was a this or that. Look, there was no mistake. They knew what they were doing. And I'm going to be talking about the power and the integral wisdom that has created really the most stable, scientific, and powerful zodiac and astrological practice that the world has ever seen. And I say this with all due respect to Western astrology tradition and people that practice Western astrology, because it's a great system. Western astrology also works really well. But you can see the power in Vedic astrology, and again, the reason it's still practiced with the same traditional, precise methods where you have Rashi, Nakshatra, Navamsha, Dasha, all of these things lined up, is simply because they all revolve around an integral zodiac. And one of the reasons why you can even have the discovery of new planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And I mean, you can use them in a Vedic astrology practice, but you really don't need to, especially to do most of your work, especially the predictive work, because the system is so stable and so scientific and so powerful, and the Indians knew exactly what they were doing. Now, I taught a web class on this. There's a link to that below, and also some reference material that can be very helpful for you to understand this. But again, you want to understand something, because I do know that there are people who use tropical zodiac now, and some who, I have to just kind of chuckle a little bit, because it seems like there are a few astrologers who it's almost like their mission in life, like their purpose in life, is to rail against the injustice of the Sidereal Zodiac, or to prove it's wrong, or something. I really just kind of don't get it. But again, the thing you want to understand is this whole these ideas that are that are being put forth against the Sidereal Zodiac as if it was a mistake and all of that, in the proportionality of what people have said for centuries, I mean, it doesn't even occupy probably 1/2 of 1/10 of 1%. There's not a single reference in any astrological text to the usage of calculating the signs using the vernal equinox. There's no reference anywhere, and again, this is admitted by those who use the tropical zodiac and who are trying to maybe illegitimize the sidereal. Even they admit, yeah, they use the sidereal zodiac. So we have to understand that to acknowledge this and to realize that every scholar for thousands of years, except a few people in this day and age, understand that the Indians were remarkable metaphysicians and scientists, and this is what they did. And they created a coherent, cohesive zodiac where rashis and nakshatras work together. So when you're seeing information online, and remember, this is the information age, but it's also the misinformation age, right? There's this joke, well, I saw it on the internet, it must be true. Have some discrimination when you look at what you're viewing. And you have to realize that the proportionality between someone who might say that the Sidereal Zodiac is a mistake and rashis are supposed to be tropical, and anyone who doesn't get this doesn't understand the meaning of life or something, they are not in an extreme minority. It's not even basically on the map as far as throughout history. And I mean every ancient astronomer, from Parashara to Varahamihira to everyone who wrote all the ancient texts up to the modern era with all of these great Indian scholars who translated these texts from Sanskrit to English so we can read them. Enormous reverence to these beings. There are references in every one of these texts where you see tropical zodiac being talked about, because at a certain point in history, the Sidereal Zodiac, which originated in Babylon, the rashis, the zodiac is inherently sidereal. I'm going to be talking more about this. I have a couple more videos that's going to talk about the actual science a little bit more, and you can also watch my web class on this. But once the tropical zodiac was created, it was a moment where it was created from the sidereal. After that point, which was about the 1st century AD, you started seeing the zodiac, which is the band of stars around the earth that we measured things with. You started seeing that reckoned in a way that's connected with the seasons. So instead of seeing it referenced as these precise ecliptic coordinates, which is what it was before in the sky, which was the thing that we used to measure equinoxes, in the Rig Veda, the Indians measured the solstice with the ecliptic nakshatra, with the ecliptic coordinate nakshatra that doesn't move. We measure these things before. We measured the solstice with the sidereal coordinates. Then all of a sudden the Greeks pinned the two things together. Now we're not measuring the equinoxes with the ecliptic coordinates. Now the equinoxes themselves are connected to the thing we were measuring it with. So this is what the tropical zodiac is, and it's fun if you use it, because both astrology systems actually developed at that time. Western and Vedic astrology actually developed at the time when this happened. And so what happened is the Indians did not convert. They said, no, this is not how it works. We are measuring things with the precise, stable, ecliptic coordinates that are integral with our nakshatras, and basically, probably within a few degrees, integral with the original Babylonian zodiac. And so they, conceived of and devised this totally integral system where rashis and nakshatras are aligned. And again, the 12-degree portions are related to the 12 sun cycles in each year, and the 27 portions are related to the lunar cycle as the moon goes around the earth. So you have these two cycles completely aligned. And what happened is, in the Western astrology tradition, they developed the tropical zodiac, and in early Western astrology you had a lot of references to the stars. And the stars were placed in the signs. Literally in the book called Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy has a whole section on fixed stars, and they're right where they should be. You know, Regulus, which is called Magha, was in Leo, and Antares, which is called Jeshta, was in Scorpio, etc. So there's certainly an idea that Western astrology had the possibility to also be a stellar tradition. But what's happened with the stars in Western astrology? They've just kind of, they don't really use them anymore. Because these zodiacs diverge, because tropical zodiac separates, the star part of the tropical zodiac, or of the Western astrology practice, is just kind of, it's not used anymore. And instead there's a lot of other things that come in, and Western astrology became quite unstable. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it works wonderfully, especially with things that don't have to do with zodiac, like measuring precise angles by transit and whatnot. But other things got quite unreliable in the Western astrology tradition, and you don't have to believe me, I'm not knocking Western astrology, just ask traditional Western astrologers, and they often say, we can learn a lot about how to do our own practice by looking at Vedic astrology because it's so stable and it's unchanged, because guess what, folks? The Indians got it right. They knew what they were doing. They resisted this conflation of the zodiac with the seasons and stuck with the sidereal portions, and thus have this completely and relentlessly stable system that connects nakshatras and rashis and harmonic charts. And by the way, anyone who says there's no connection between nakshatras and rashis or whatever, it's simply not true. They're deeply connected, and implicitly and explicitly. In Briyat Parashar Horasastra, he makes a very declarative statement. Planets move through nakshatras, rashis occupy the same space starting from Aries. Very clear statement. Varahamihira says the same thing. And he connects nakshatra padas with rashis. And actually the padas are the Navamsha chart, the 4 quarter portions of each nakshatra. Rashi nakshatra are all the way connected down to the level of harmonic charts and everything. I mean, it's such an integral, stable system. And what would have happened if the Indians would have converted the rashis to tropical is probably very much what happened with Western astrology. Something would have gotten sacrificed and thrown overboard. Probably the nakshatras or something, but you would have lost this integrity. And again, it wasn't because they weren't smart enough to know that they should have converted, it's because they were smart enough to know that the tropical zodiac itself was a conflation, which, you know, again, it's fine that there was a whole astrological tradition that grew up around it, but with India, their tradition had always been sidereal. Again, in the Rig Veda and the Vedanga Jyotisha, everything was measured in nakshatras. They measured seasons in nakshatras. They measured their 5-year cycles in 135 nakshatras. Everything was measured sidereally. And then after the Greeks pinned the zodiac to the seasons, now they start measuring the solstices tropically. And again, some say this is because, well, they finally understood. They finally got the light. They finally realized the error of their ways. Again, you can say, well, Sam says this, he says that. It's not Sam saying it. It's really every scholar for the last several thousand years. Again, the people that translated these ancient texts also understood this. They understood, the B.V. Raman and the living legends like K.N. Rao, the great master astrologers of this era. We've looked at this. I've been talking about this with people like Vamadeva, David Frawley, and others for years. And again, people that have looked into this understand the simple migration of the zodiac into India and the immense wisdom of the Indians to create and to connect the sidereal solar portions with the sidereal lunar portions to create this coherent practicing system. Now, there's a lot of historical background that I'm not going into because that's not really what this video is about. I do go into it in enormous depth in my web class, but just stated simply, the way this worked, at least historically, is the zodiac evolved from, actually probably back in the Sumerian times, there was maybe even 24 portions. This is the speculation, but by the time it reached the Babylonians, around 1000 BC, there were 18 portions, and then that was codified into 12 equal 30-degree portions. So one of the things to understand, This is also something that people who are confused about, well, you know, if it's these constellations, then why are some bigger and some smaller and all this? Look, drawing the animal figurines in the sky, this wasn't primary to the zodiac. Okay, this is what, you know, the Greeks did that. The Greeks superimposed these sort of pictograms. The original portions were 12, 30-degree equal portions, which is exactly what we use now. And again, that was a Babylonian, you would say invention or convention. Now, again, we have to understand something. We say it's Babylonian because we see where it's written down. And it's written in the cuneiform tablets in Babylon, but many speculate. And when I say many, I want to be very precise. I'm not talking about astrologers who theorize endlessly. I'm talking about the scientists of the last 100 years or so who went back and read the cuneiform tablets in Babylon and who know how to read like Babylonian cryptography, and people who went back to Egypt, you know, Egyptologists who understand how to read hieroglyphs and all of this. One in particular, Pingree, David Pingree, had a strong speculation because of the sharing of technologies between Babylon and India, that the most likely reason why the sidereal Babylonian zodiac maintained its integrity in India and the Indians resisted the tropical incursion was because they were probably sharing, and they probably already had adapted and adopted these sidereal portions by the time the Babylonian zodiac was exported to Greece around the 2nd century BC, and then was converted to tropical around the 1st century AD. So the Babylonian zodiac went from Babylon to Greece. And again, this is all documented. This isn't, oh, well, that's what you say. This is science at this point. Again, I have links. You can find this. This is not hard to find. It went to Greece, and then, again, a few things happened where they at least calculated or understood the nature of the precession of the zodiac. So for some reason, and probably because they were trying to get a better calendar and trying to get a better handle on the Earth going around the sun, which is all the tropical zodiac is based on. It is not based on measuring planets moving around the Earth, which is what astrology is. We are measuring where the thing is relative to where we are. It's precise ecliptic coordinate. That's what the sidereal zodiac is, and that's what the Indians retained. And that's why for thousands of years, everyone who's looked at this said, yep, that works. This is why it works. And it doesn't make any sense that they would have adopted the tropical zodiac. They never used it. And even so, they resisted this conflation of ideas that pinned the seasons on the Earth to the planets moving around the Earth. So tropical zodiac is literally taking our portion of how the precession of the equinoxes has, moved us in relation to the sky, and projecting that into the sky, rather than projecting these fixed portions based on fixed stars and other portions that were used a long time ago. Now again, some say that it's because they were too dumb to actually know what they were doing or something, and they didn't really come of age until they understood the precession and all of that. So again, if people think that and that really captivates their heart, they're free to do it. And I'm your champion to do it, really. But again, it gets just a little crazy when someone says this is what they think is right, so it proves the whole tradition of astrology in India is wrong. And by the way, let me just say something. What's exactly wrong again? The most stable astrological system the world has ever known? What's exactly wrong with it? What's trying to get fixed here? Again, someone who is able to practice that astrology better using that zodiac, that is the seasonal zodiac projected into the sky to measure coordinates, if that works better for you, even though you want to understand it breaks apart the consistent power and continuity of the sidereal system, but if it works better for you, then you should use it. And I'm your champion to use it. But this doesn't mean that because you use it, everybody else is making a mistake, everyone for thousands of years. Again, if you hear that perspective, be very aware and be very wary of it. Because, again, what's the problem it's trying to fix? That Vedic astrology doesn't work? Is that the theory? Because, a lot of people wouldn't agree with that. And it certainly has worked well for me for, I've been... It's really funny because I've been doing daily forecasts. based on the sidereal rashis, nakshatras, tithis, which I haven't even talked about, and aspects and all, purely sidereal, for way more than a decade. I think I started in 2006, publishing daily forecast. Tracking this every day, I do it. Every day. Every time a planet moves into a sidereal rashi, usually, especially a large one, or, Jupiter, Saturn, I put out detailed forecasts of what to expect, and for the most part, they're pretty right on. This is why I have a lot of people who want to get my forecast. But aside from self-aggrandizement, there's a reason why Vedic astrology is connected to this sidereal, this integral approach and this integral zodiac, and why they resisted the influx of the the tropical sort of conflation of zodiacs, which is what happened. Because again, when you pin the seasons, when you pin the Earth going around the sun to the sidereal measuring device, you're kind of joining the thing you're measuring to the thing that's measuring it. And you want to understand something else. This is why there's a whole tradition, and it's been in vogue since the 40s. In Western astrology, there's an entire sidereal Western astrology tradition by a man named Cyril Fagan, who started it, who was an Egyptologist. Again, these are hardcore scientists. This isn't an astrologer who gets some wacky idea that he thinks he's discovered something and then goes on some crazy rant trying to prove everybody wrong. This was a Western astrologer and Egyptologist who studied the ancient astronomy as well, the ancient archaeoastronomy of Egypt, Babylon, and also India. And he was like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? This tropical zodiac is a total conflation of the things I'm saying. The same thing. Like, why are we measuring the movements of the planets in the sky in reference to the seasons on Earth? We should be measuring the seasons on Earth and aligning that with the calendar and with the seasons on Earth, like it's directed in the Surya Siddhanta. Surya Siddhanta doesn't say to erect horoscopes based on that. It says to align the seasons with that. It says the seasons fall here. But what happened by the Surya Siddhanta is, instead of measuring, look, it could have very easily said, and it would have said, if you didn't have the conflation of the zodiac by the Greeks, it would have said that the beginning of the winter solstice is, what would that be? Zero Capricorn sidereally would be the second pada of Uttarashada, right? The second pada of Uttarashada and the third pada of Punarvasu at the time, rather than zero Capricorn, zero Cancer. The fact that they were pinned to zodiac signs, again, it sounds like it's so logical. It's actually not logical at all. They are things that have nothing to do with each other. And again, a lot of uncovering what seems to be confusing is to first trace things back to their source. By the way, if I got the padas wrong, forgive me, thinking on the fly, I think I got it right. But zero Cancer is the fourth pada of Punarvasu, and zero Capricorn is the second pada of Uttarashada. In the Rig Veda, that's how they measured it. It was Shravishta, although I'm not sure, but I don't think they had the exact degrees. It was Shravishta and Aslesha. This is how they measured it in the Vedanga Jyotisha, sidereally, purely. It could have been the same way in Surya Siddhanta, but but their astronomy had been influenced by the Greeks, and who knows why they adapted. I guess it was a shorthand. But the other thing we have to understand is, even texts like Surya Siddhanta have been revised so many times and rewritten, and all of these texts that talk about the tropical zodiac come way after the Greeks had pinned the zodiac to the seasons. And again, the Indians resisted doing this with their astrology. This isn't speculation, this is fact. That's what happened. They did not use the tropical zodiac to do their astrology. So you can speculate as to why, and again, the story I'm giving you is the very clean, simple, sensible, historical view that, again, 99.9% of anyone who's ever looked at this comes to understand. They obviously didn't adapt to the tropical zodiac. There was obviously a reason. One of them is they were obviously already using sidereal nakshatras. The Babylonian portion's already almost directly comported, because we don't have specific micro degrees, but it was so easy to just fit them together like perfectly. And so these 12 portions of sidereal sky measured and aligned perfectly. And so there was no reason to adapt this zodiac that's moving in no relation to the sidereal. And it's not really rational in my mind to assume that they didn't understand the precession, or they were, again, this idea that the Indians just didn't understand things and somehow were like, oh, well, we've developed this amazing astrology system, but we can't figure out what to do with the zodiac. I don't get why anyone would think this when we just we just happen to create the most stable, amazing, remarkable astrology system the world has ever known. In fact, it's so resilient we don't even need to bring in outer planets or do anything else. You could just practice. And in fact, you don't even have to practice all of the techniques. There's so many techniques that work so well. If you adapt about 15 or 20 principles and apply it to this incredible strength that goes all the way down from rashi to nakshatra to harmonic chart, it is so stable and solid. And by the way, it's also extremely psychological. And again, because the nakshatras are very psychological. They're related to the stories of, in our mind and consciousness and awareness, and they're very metaphysical. You have to understand something. This is the view of most. Astrology is a study of our place in the cosmos, not necessarily our place on Earth. We measure our cycles on Earth, by seasons, by all of these rhythms on Earth. But the zodiac itself and the sky, when you look up in the sky, that you go, I'm not just this creature on Earth. And that's what the Sidereal Zodiac is. It's your connection to that. And again, to say that there's no connection between Rashi and Nakshatra, like Ashwini has nothing to do with Aries. It's kind of laughable. They occupy the same portion of the sky. One is a lunar portion, one is a tropical portion, or a solar portion. So it takes 30 days for the sun to go through that. It takes 12 days for it to go through, let's say, the nakshatra, if you're looking at it just as the sun's movement and the days. But to say that the enthusiasm and passion and drive of Ashwini and the two horses that we need to get pulling in the same direction rather than just kind of scattering in different directions, and we need to yoke them together through Kriya and practice, has nothing to do with Aries. Okay, if you say so. I don't know where that comes from, to say that's mostly Taurus. And then that we have to bear the result of that action and bear the result of how focused and joined our energies are in the next nakshatra of Bharani, where we bear the result of our actions. These are all qualities of Aries. To say that, Pushya, which is the breasts, and this whole story of creation where the moon runs off with the wife of Brihaspati, but yet they nurture and suckle the child. To say that has nothing to do with the sign of Cancer, okay, if that's what you want to do. Again, I'm not mocking someone using tropical zodiac, but I'm also not going to sit by and act as though there's no connection to nakshatras. This is the same portion of sky, just a smaller proportionality. To say that Magha has nothing to do with Leo, again, even in Tetrabiblos, the ancient Greek text, they talked about Regulus in Leo. They reckon for these stars in their sidereal place. And now we still use the same thing in Vedic astrology. The Sidereal Zodiac is integrally connected to the Rashi and the Nakshatra. Who could say, almost with a straight face, that the qualities of Magha, the king on the throne, has anything to do with Virgo? Again, we can make this statement because of some hair-splitting account in a text where there's no explicit statement, but it is explicit. It connects Rashi and Nakshatra several times in every text. Anytime it's referenced. Nakshatra and Rashi started Ashwini. And because there are conflicting statements that show up in India that also brought in tropical zodiac at that time, should not be surprising. Yes, you see some contradictory statements after the Greeks pinned the zodiac to the seasons. And this was at a time when the zodiac itself was getting I don't want to say improved, but it was becoming a multidimensional structure. And again, one of the things that's really interesting is, you know, you can't really put all of this on the Greeks because there are many facets of the Indian rashis that don't have any Greek correlation, like gunas and castes and all of these other things that were purely Indian. So there's a lot about those things, but one thing is not, there are a few things that are not confusing at all. And those of you who are practicing Vedic astrology, or you're a student and you're interested in studying, you should not be confused by, as if there's some big debate or some big equal choice going on. It's not an equal choice. It's just not. Again, people want to use tropical zodiac, that's fine, but the verdict is in, folks. Vedic astrology works. It's been the most stable, consistent, connected astrological system the world has ever known for a reason. The main reason is likely that they use the Sidereal Zodiac, the organizing structure around which everything turns. It's not just a part of it. Well, they could have done it, used tropical, and it still would have worked. It would have worked even better. Based on what? Based on the fact that they would have two zodiacs now moving all over the place that have nothing to do with each other? Again, you can't make irrational statements and claims like that, particularly when there's a direct path right to the truth, right to the source, and the real truth is the stability and power of the system in general. Again, what exactly are we trying to fix by exposing the evil of the Sidereal Zodiac or the error? Like, if you see these kinds of ideas, just put them in context. And, you know, I'm going to be making a few more videos that perhaps get in a little more depth about that transmission of knowledge. You can also watch the web class that I've put together because I go over that history in a lot of depth. It's almost 2 hours and have a lot of supporting material. Again, the thing you want to understand, just this last thing, is that this isn't just astrologers. These things have been researched by leading archaeoastronomers like Otto Neugebauer, David Pingree, a host of others, a lady named Rohrbacher, so many for, again, decades of their life spent understanding this transmission. And again, there's not a single scholar or even Vedic astrologer or Vedic teacher of the past that has ever come to the conclusion that it was anything other than incredibly wise, incredibly sensible, that the Indians used sidereal, incredibly stable, and produced like the greatest astrological system the world has ever seen. That interlaces seamlessly with all the other Vedic practices, yoga, Ayurveda, all of it works seamlessly. And by the way, there are times when we need to use what we would call the tropical zodiac, meaning the Earth going around the sun and being connected with solstices and seasons and not making mistakes like celebrating Makar Sankranti on the sidereal ingress into Capricorn. I've been speaking out about this for years. It is I don't want to use tropical because that's not the right word. It's a seasonal event. It's the beginning of winter, which has nothing to do with measuring the sidereal portions. Of course, anyone who's looked into this knows that, and you know, these are different things. And again, this issue requires discrimination, not a bludgeon, not a mace. So I'll be talking more about this, and I hope this has been helpful. And and so one of the main reasons that I did the video is because So also one of the main reasons I did the video is because, you know, off and on for years now, I've been seeing other people, you know, not just talking about using tropical zodiac, but again, almost like on a crusade to mock the sidereal zodiac, and I've gotten so many messages over the years, and I haven't said anything. People are free to express themselves, and so am I. But, you know, I just see so many students confused and wondering, well, how does this work, really? And the only voice seems to be those voices talking about zodiac. So this is a just practical, rational, sensible explanation as to why we use sidereal zodiac, why it's not a mistake, why 99.9% of every astrologer that's ever lived for thousands of years, including every astrologer you've ever heard of, except for the few that you hear saying this stuff, has used it. And people have looked into it, and we understand what we're looking at. So you have to measure all of those things. And again, be careful, because we live in the information age, but also the misinformation age.